All right, let's start with the big story that we are tracking at this hour, where according to reports that have come in the Afghan media, over 70 Taliban fighters have agreed to lay down arms in exchange for jobs to be provided by the Afghan government. Now, the carrot and stick approach, which has been adopted by the Ashraf Ghani government, a group of Taliban militants have agreed to lay down arms and negotiate peace. In fact, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani for long has been advocating to stop the Taliban insurgency by bringing the moderate Taliban factions into mainstream politics in Afghanistan. The Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has said, and I quote, "The Taliban are expected to give inputs to the peacemaking process, the goal of which is to draw the Taliban as an organization to peace talks." Now, in the latest round of negotiations, which have been held with the Taliban militants in the Herat province, the over 70 militants have agreed to lay down arms in exchange for jobs in the Tapi project, which is a flagship initiative for a gas pipeline involving the nations of Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. So this is an interesting development that has taken place, where some factions of the Taliban have now chosen to negotiate with the Afghan government. Their earlier stated position had always been that they would only negotiate with the United States, but that appears not to be the case, because now they're also speaking with the Afghan government. And to discuss more on this as to what this would imply for the region at large, we're joined in by our international affairs correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran. Ramesh, good morning to you. This is an interesting sort of a proposal where about 70 Taliban fighters reportedly have laid down arms in exchange for jobs in the Tapi project. How does this strike you?
Well, this flows from President Ashraf Ghani of Afghanistan's peace offer or offer of talks to the Taliban made at the second Kabul process conference, which concluded in Kabul recently. Remember, President Ghani has spoken about offering a ceasefire, releasing the prisoners and also reviewing the constitution, which, by the way, is already based very much on Islamic law or Sharia. But that said, this, if it is true indeed, because this comes from local media reports in Afghanistan, including the Taliban governor and Taliban officials, and one spokesperson is saying that they have accepted the offer of talks. But if it is indeed true, then it makes a substantial change significantly on the ground going forward, especially if Kabul and Taliban can come to some sort of an agreement going forward. But that said, India will be carefully watching the proceedings, especially at a time when India has consistently maintained that talks should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. There's no scope for third-party mediation or involvement, and that Taliban must renounce violence and accept the constitution of Afghanistan. So it remains to be seen where the Taliban leadership will go from here, especially at a time when they're gaining ground on the ground in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. That's an interesting point. About 70% of the territory in Afghanistan, is under the sway of the Taliban, according to recent estimates. And with that being the case, why do you think the Taliban would at this point of time want to come to the negotiating table with a government that is now losing sway over very large territories in Afghanistan?
Well, although Taliban has had recent successes in foisting terror attacks in Afghanistan, but the fact remains that the pressure is building upon both Kabul and the Taliban, especially because of Donald Trump's conditions-based approach in Afghanistan, which, remember, in August he unveiled his South Asia strategy, which puts a premium on conditions-based approach, whereby they mean that Washington will have no fixed timelines and the number of troops will go up or come down depending on the situation obtaining on the ground inside Afghanistan. So it remains to be seen how Washington goes from here, especially given its military offensive against the Taliban inside Afghanistan.
Absolutely indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Ramesh Ramachandran, for having joined us and got us those updates. So it is an interesting development that has taken place in Afghanistan. It now remains to be seen as to how soon, if at all, whether peace would be restored in that war-torn country.